I'm Michael Wunsch. I'm the plant pathologist at the Carrington Research Center. The research that we are currently working on to follow up from our droplet size and application timing research on soybeans is the question of when do you make a second fungicide application targeting white mold if you're going to make two? One of the things we have learned is that in longer maturity soybeans of usually 0.5 maturity and higher, that when conditions remain favorable for white mold throughout the bloom period, say starting at R1 or R2 as the soybeans enter full bloom, and then continuing through that bloom period through R4, when those conditions extend out, those longer maturity beings have a long enough window of susceptibility that first fungicide application put on at 100% R2 oftentimes gets overwhelmed. The residual activity does not extend to the end of the period of susceptibility. And you can actually make a lot more money and have a lot more profitable soybean crop under those conditions by making a second fungicide application. But the problem that we have is that no one has ever asked, when do you make that application? Do you make that application in 7 days, 10 days, 14 days? The standard recommendation is to apply it 10 to 14 days. In Brazil, where they get very good activity out of the fungicides for white mold, they make the two applications 7 to 10 days apart. In the United States and in Canada, we have traditionally made applications 10 to 14 days apart, and we don't get as good control. Anecdotally, I have seen very good control when we have made applications 7 days apart. And so we are testing this. It makes sense that a tighter application window may be optimal in this case because we need the fungicide to get to the lower canopy, and by the nature of the system in which we're working, in which you're applying a fungicide to a canopy that's oftentimes at or near closure, and you need to get the fungicide to the bottom, you don't get as much fungicide deposited to your target as you would for a normal foliar disease in the upper canopy. And thus, you drop below the threshold of the amount of fungicide you need for good control earlier because you got less to the target. And so then you need to make the second application earlier than if you were targeting a foliar disease that were in the upper canopy. So we are testing that for the first time this year with testing done in Carrington and in Oaks under irrigation. All fungicide applications need to be made relative to canopy characteristics. Our research with TJET tips indicates that if the average canopy closure is less than 90%, you need to apply with fine to medium droplets with the droplet size calibrated to the amount of canopy closure. Okay? If it's 85% canopy closure, use medium droplets. Less than 80% canopy closure, use fine to medium droplets. If the canopy closure on average is more than 90%, use coarse droplets with TJET tips. And with an application B, a second application at the R3 growth stage, the canopy is almost always completely sealed up, in which case you're almost always going to be using coarse droplets.